This is the Sports Hit List. By the fans, for the fans.
Episode 5 of the Pro Wrestling Mount Rushmore series, Carl Launch for the Sports Hit List by the fans and for the fans. Let me introduce my panel as we get into managers in pro wrestling all time. We have Mike Murillo. Mike, how you doing, sir?
What's up?
We have the president of the Jeep Nation, Matt Williams. How you doing, sir?
I'm doing great, Carl. Thanks for having me back.
We have TK, the Tank Tom Kenny. He's not talking baseball. He's not talking football, but he is talking pro wrestling. How you doing, TK?
Great, Carl. Always great to be here. Thanks for having me.
And for the first time on the Mount Rushmore series, my brother from another mother. He definitely was on a show with me from the PWS. Hollywood J is in the building. Hollywood J, thank you, sir, for coming on.
Thanks for the invite. I'm glad it's not, baseball talk, because you always you every time you invite me, it's like the Spanish do. Let's invite him.
Not at all, sir. You know I had to get you in on one of these pro wrestling, sir. We're picking managers. We're at the manager part of our Rushmore series. So, Jay, since this is your first Mount Rushmore, I'm going to give you the floor first. You tell us all time in pro wrestling, who cracks your top 4 managers all time?
Top 4, right. I mean, it was a tough one, and there were some names that I had to leave off, but I'm only giving you 4. I'm not giving you any of my honorable mentions like I mentioned yesterday to you. So my 4 are 4, Mr. Fuji. He was dirty, just the way I like my managers. And if you look at his career, you had, people who are familiar with suit wearing, top hat Mr. Fuji.
Yeah.
That was the first half of his managerial WWF career. And then you had his second half where he was Yokozuna's manager. And he finally had a chance to manage an actual WWF champion, one of the most dominant WWF champions of all time. And then for my 3rd, I went with James Dillon. I mean, how can you leave this man off? Managed perhaps, in my mind, the greatest faction of all time in the Four Horsemen. I mean, so much can be said about Dillon, but it's the Four Horsemen. How do you leave that man off, especially after that run? I think he was their manager for maybe 4 years, from 85 to 89, if I'm correct. And then 2, Bobby the Brain Heenan. When I speak manager, I think, the Heenan family was the manager for perhaps the biggest wrestling match in the history of wrestling. Not the best, the biggest. WrestleMania 3, he was Andre the Giant's manager. I mean, like I said, I love dirty managers, so how can you not love Heenan? Heenan, when I started watching wrestling, the Heenan family to me was the dirtiest of the dirty, and Heenan, and then being a mouthpiece, and then he had his run with as an announcer, but that's here nor there. Heenan to me is has to be number 2, and then number 1 is, and I would hope that all of you have him as your number 1 as well, is Paul Heyman. I mean, enough said. The man. We throw out what he did with WCW. I mean, whatever. He owes a lot of people a lot of money somewhere. So as a manager, whether it's with his run with Brock or now, as you see his run with Roman, he is just I always say, if Heenan could wrestle, he would be the greatest superstar ever to be in the industry. His talking is no one can match him, and Brock needed that. Obviously, Roman maybe doesn't need that, but it's working for Roman now. But to me, Paul Heyman has to be number 1 of all time, just off of the fact that no one can out-talk the man.
All right, so Jay goes with Paul Heyman, Bobby Heenan, James Dillon, and Mr. Fuji. Let's go Fuji.
Mr. Fuji.
Fuji, sorry. TK the Tank, man. TK the Tank, you're on the clock, sir. Go ahead.
All right, so greatest managers, Mount Rushmore. I'm going to start with my number 4. My number 4 was a guy I never really liked, but that's kind of why he made this list, was Jimmy Hart. I always found Jimmy Hart very annoying. I always found Jimmy Hart was very good at what he did, the mouth of the South, running around with that high-pitched voice, managing Hulk Hogan in the 80s when Hulk Hogan was huge, and really from 1985 to 1983, really making his mark in WWE, WWE Hall of Famer as well. But he had been around for a long time before that. Memphis wrestling, he was there from the 70s to the 80s before he went to WWE. did some time with TNA, but the Colonel, the Memphis Chicken, Jimmy Hart, I had to put him on here because I feel like he's just so iconic with his megaphone that he deserved to be on here at number 4. Number 3, Percy Pringle, Pallbearer, WWE. Got to put Pallbearer on here. Just the fact that he didn't start in the 70s as Percy Pringle and had a career before Pallbearer, but when he came in and took over for Brother Love, managing The Undertaker, that really took it to a new height. He was Pro Wrestling Illustrated's Manager of the Year in 1998. When, Kane came in, that's got to be Kane. You don't really get – he was kind of the glue that held Undertaker and Kane together in those early years and really helped them get to the main event and be really who they were. And for that, I have, Pallbearer as my number 3. Number 2 and number 1 were close, but number 2, I'm going to put Paul Heyman. You look at Paul Heyman's career, started in the late 80s, Paulie Dangerously. I mean, he as well, before Pallbearer, managed Mean Mark Callis in World Championship Wrestling. So Paulie Dangerously has been around forever. 1989 had a ridiculous tuxedo match against Jim Cornette. Probably my favorite manager versus manager match, even though it was bowling shoe ugly. And then you look at what he did after that. I mean, even just ECW, I'm almost about to leave ECW out. But he wasn't really a manager in ECW. So when you look at what he did in WWE, almost managing Chris Benoit, but then saying, no, it's this guy, Brock Lesnar, and sticking himself to Brock Lesnar in 2002 really took him to the next level in terms of him being a manager in the history of pro wrestling. And you see what he's doing today. You see what he's doing with Roman. You see what he did with CM Punk, really just keeping himself relevant. Brock Lesnar is gone. Paul Heyman is still relevant now because he's with Roman Reigns. So Paul Heyman, no one can really talk as good as him. So he's number 2. But there is one guy I just think has more natural talent and just really just shown in the in any capacity he was put in, but especially as a manager, and that is Bobby Heenan. Bobby Heenan is my number 1. Has to be. He was phenomenal. He started out in the 60s, American Wrestling Association, Georgia Championship Wrestling, World Wrestling Federation, World Championship Wrestling. Anywhere he was successful and he was great. You had a whole stable based upon his managing. You had the Heenan family. You don't see the Heyman family because you see guys like Cesaro and Axel couldn't really cut it, but the Heenan family was almost like it was a known faction throughout many, many, many years with different incarnations and different guys because Bobby Heenan was just so good. I mean, even when he's just doing commentary in the 1992 Royal Rumble with It's Not Fair to Flair, you just see how quick and how sharp and how amazing he is. Walking with Andre the Giant. To me, there is no better manager in professional wrestling history than Bobby Heenan, and it's who you would aspire to be. So that's my number 1, Bobby Heenan.
Okay, so TK goes Bobby Heenan, Paul Heyman, Pallbearer, Jimmy Hart. Even though Paul Heyman doesn't have the Heyman family, you are known as the Heyman guy. I'm just you could be.
You're a Heyman guy. That's true. That's true.
You are a Heyman guy. Matt, you're on the clock, sir. Top 4.
Okay, well, I have to start off actually just giving a shout out to the man, the slickster, the doctor of style. Big shout out to a pioneer of managers. But my top 4, I'm not going to go in any particular order, but I have to start off with giving some love to the lovely, rest in peace, Sherry Martel, sensational Sherry. She could do it all. Tag teams, solo acts. Let's not forget how important she was in the rise of Shawn Michaels. Let's not forget how important she was to the rise of the Harlem Heat. Obviously, her run with Macho Man, the Macho King run. She is phenomenal. She could take a bump. She was a good worker in her heyday as well. And she could talk, and she talked well. And she could tell such great stories and was such a huge asset. Sensational Sherry is far and beyond so better than so many of her male counterparts. She's got to be on my Mount Rushmore. After that is Paul Heyman. And, my 2 predecessors have espoused so much on Paul Heyman that I can't really find much more to add to how great Paul E. Dangerously is. The WCW runs with the Danger. I mean, look at who he managed. The Dangerous Alliance had Arn Anderson, Stunning Steve, Rick Rude. We mentioned Mean Mark House. So many great people that he managed there. What he did manage some in ECW, even though he was running the thing. And then obviously what he's been doing now in the WWE. Far and beyond. And the fact that Vince won't let him do a new Dangerous Alliance is ridiculous because there are stars like Shelton Benjamin and Cesaro and guys who need a mouthpiece, Chad Gable, guys who need that mouthpiece that he could be doing for them too, and not just what he did for Brock and what he did for Roman. It's a shame and a waste of his talent. And obviously, Bobby the Brain Heenan, he's the GOAT. There's in ring work, taking the manager bumps, working with the best. He was phenomenal and the quintessential example. If you look at Pro Wrestling Manager in the dictionary, there's a picture of Bobby Heenan. He is that. And my number 4, I've really been going back and forth on between Jimmy Hart and Jim Cornette. And I don't like Cornette, so I'm going to say Jimmy Hart. And not just because I don't like Cornette, but some of the reasons TK mentioned earlier, who Jimmy Hart worked with and managed to success, Hogan, the Hart Foundation. He was phenomenal in even making wrestlers that a lot of people didn't care about because they didn't have great chemistry. Like, they didn't make sense. I remember him managing Mengin Barbarian. And I was like, what?
Yeah.
Why is Jimmy Hart with his megaphone managing Mengin Barbarian? But he helped get them, over to a point that they wouldn't be able to do by themselves. So the Mouth of the South and his Tiki Bar get the love from me in my top 4.
Okay, so Matt goes Jimmy Hart, Bobby Heenan, Paul Heyman, and Sensational Sherry. TK,
really quick, just to say that Jim Cornette was also my 5th. He was my honorable mention. But Bobby Heenan, the Weasel Suit match against Ultimate Warrior, one of the other best manager matches against someone ever. That was a hilarious match.
Absolutely.
Okay, Mike, you're on the clock, sir.
I'll keep it short and sweet. You guys mentioned every single one that I had on my Mount Rushmore. We're practically almost identical.
Go ahead.
I got Jim Hart, Bobby Heenan, Paul Heyman. Now, you mentioned an interesting name, Jim Cornette. I'm going to put Jim Cornette in there. Okay, I think I know why you don't like him. I think I know why a lot of people don't like him, because he likes to talk a lot of smack. But, I mean, he's always in character. That is Jim Cornette. Midnight South Express, I wasn't around for that time. I'm not that old. But a lot of tag teams are inspired by them, by the Midnight. So I'm going with Jim Cornette. But you guys really took everything. Yeah. But, yeah, Jim Cornette is with me.
All right, so he's got Jimmy Hart, Bobby Heenan, Jim Cornette, and Paul Heyman. There are a couple of guys who didn't make the list, and I know we don't say honorable mentions, but was Classy Freddie Blasey, Captain Lou Albano, were they any way near your list, or they did not even qualify, Jay?
No, hell no. I'm gonna make a statement right now, and I hope it doesn't come back to bite me on the ass. 10 years from now, I'm not so don't quote me like, oh, you put 10 years from now. And I know this is a weird time in professional wrestling with no fans. In 10 years, we're going to look at MVP's current run and say, God damn, we got to put, like, I would remove, in 10 years from now, I would remove Mr. Fuji and put MVP. Wow. MVP is doing right now as a, tail end of his career, wrestler / manager. But I love this whole Hurt business. It's great, and he's great for them, and he's great for the not the sport, the industry.
The sport, yeah, it's a sport.
Yeah,
that's another debate.
Theatrics stuff.
Yeah.
This is a sport. It's real.
But yeah, people got to really start paying attention to what MVP is doing right now.
Okay, so again, to my point though,
I'll answer your question, Carl.
Yeah, but those two don't qualify.
They did. I love Captain Lou Albano, and rest in peace, Captain Lou, Super Mario Brothers, Super Show. I loved him, but he was not in that. Like, I think of managers, I'll think of him, but he's not up there. Now, Freddie Blasey, he had a Hall of Fame career. He definitely should be in the conversation. And if someone put him in their top 4, I wouldn't side eye him. This isn't the boy Clint saying Ronda Rousey or the Outlaw was his crazy pick. I forgot. It was so bad that I forgot what it was. What was that pick he made, Mike? It was terrible. Miz and Morrison and tag team, like
the guy's ridiculous.
Yeah, saying Freddie Blasey in your top 4 is not some outlandish thing. It makes sense. And if you're 50, 60, 70 years old, you saw the greatness that was Freddie Blasey. Most of us are probably, early 40s, mid 30s, maybe late 20s. We did not see that. We weren't present for that.
No.
So it's probably not going to be. It's not in our minds. I know it because I'm a historian, and that's it. Because if I wasn't, I wouldn't know about Freddie Blasey's career.
Yeah, I think if you make a top 10 list, Captain Lou Albano, Freddie Blasey, J.J. Dillon, they're all on my top 10 list. But we're trying to crack down to the top 4. There was guys that were a little more recent and that had done more. I hadn't seen too much of Freddie Blasey or Albano except for what I've seen on YouTube clips, so that may have helped. But also just another honorable mention I want to throw out there is Vicki Guerrero. What a source of heat. I know that he was more on her than the wrestler, but when you look at what she did, she helped Edge win. She helped Dolph Ziggler get his first world title. She managed Lay Cool. So from like 2007
hold on a second.
She had a great stretch as a manager.
Okay, I just thought about something. Does she count as a manager or as a valet?
Right.
She was a manager. She talked.
You know what? That goes back to the conversation we had pre-show where we were discussing.
She was the general manager.
What makes a manager?
She was a mouthpiece.
Again,
she was a mouthpiece.
What's the difference, Jay, would you say, between a manager and a valet? And I know you talked about Miss Elizabeth. Do we qualify her as a manager or a valet? I think there's a fine line here.
Yeah, to me, she's a valet. If you have no input on the microphone, then you're just a valet. Miss Elizabeth is definitely just a valet. Selena Vega is like a weird one because she was kind of the mouthpiece for
she was a manager.
Yeah, she was.
Yeah, Vicky was manager.
She was
yeah.
And Vicki Guerrero was managing.
Yeah,
and if you're gonna, but you see, TK, you mentioned Vicki, and you're right, she had a great run. But if we're gonna talk about other female managers, even though she's a train wreck, you can't leave out Sunny.
No,
we gotta leave out Sunny.
Yeah, Sunny.
But what did Sunny do?
Sunny
though?
had so much heat going with her backstage that it translated.
With the body donnas, yeah, she did.
She had the body donnas, the smoking guns.
Right, but then again, if you're gonna put her in there, you got to put in Terry Runnels too.
And Sable.
Right, and
Sable was a valet. She ain't say a word.
Sable was
a valet.
Yeah.
Fact of the matter is, they all look good.
Yeah, right.
You know what I mean? That's why people like them, because they are all hot.
But to Terry Runnels, was Terry Runnels a valet or was she a manager?
Valet.
She started as a valet. She managed a little bit at the end. Because a while when she was Goldust, she didn't say a word. She stood there. She looked good. She held the cigar. She didn't do nothing. Later on, when she was managing the Hardys, she was more of a manager. She was getting more involved. She was doing more managerial things, getting physically involved.
Right.
But when she first came out, she wasn't. And Sable never got involved until later when she started her in-ring career, which was a
Trash. Yeah, it was horrible.
Yeah. I think the fact that we're even having this conversation shows you how absolutely sexist Vince McMahon is.
Yes, exactly. But have you noticed, like we're mentioning all these women right here. Have you noticed that they've dated the wrestlers? So they really are valets. Marco Maron and Sable, they dated before she went to Brock Lesnar. You know what I mean? And I'm going to go back to Vicki. Vicki, like, she was together with Edge, and storyline wise, she was together with Edge and Dolph. So, I mean, you're making out with two guys that you're with. I don't know. Does that...
Well, what about
this is Vince McMahon. Vince McMahon, who has admittedly proposed
but I mean, again, Miss Elizabeth was married
with his daughter.
He did propose that one. You're right. It's Vince.
Vince is crazy.
What about Stephanie McMahon when she was with Triple H with the McMahon Helmsley era? Was that a manager or valet, or was that more of a duo?
I guess she was a manager, but she was just part of the McMahon Helmsley era, so it wasn't really
that's a tough one. That's a tough one.
Would she be there? She did fight a couple matches, but it was really heavily gimmicked matches, and she was always with Triple H, and she was great at getting heat and great at talking. So, like, what would you classify?
And she was the women's champ during that time. Like, Stephanie's run and Chyna's run are both very difficult to gauge because
you know what, Chyna was more of a bodyguard in my opinion.
That's how they pushed her as a bodyguard, but bodyguard valet is the same thing. She didn't say anything, but she did get physically involved because she was so imposing. That's a tough one.
Baby Carl, you could do a Mount Rushmore of bodyguards.
You could
put my boy Mr. Hughes up there.
Yeah, for sure.
Diesel's up there.
Vinny Vegas, more like.
Right.
All right. So, Mike, I'm going to give you the floor first. Out of your four, who cracks the list, the ultimate list?
Everybody has said mine, so I'm going to go with the one that nobody said, Jim Cornette.
Wait, hold on.
Of course.
You're killing me.
Hold on. Here we go. This is where it gets interesting.
Let's go.
Jim Cornette. Jay, out of your 4, who cracks the list?
I go back and forth between Heyman and Heenan. I'm gonna, just because he was, when I started watching wrestling, Heenan was the guy. He's still my guy today. I'm going Bobby Heenan.
Okay, Bobby Heenan. Matt?
I know what TK is gonna. I don't know what TK is gonna do now.
We're gonna go crazy one way or another.
Because Mike had to throw the wrench in there with Jim Cornette.
Okay.
Carl, this is on purpose. Carl always picks the guy that's gonna throw the wrench. That's what Carl does.
Right.
Hey, listen, that's what I do. That is what I do.
See, Carl's behind the scenes sending messages like, "Okay, say something crazy right now."
No, he doesn't say it to me. Carl does not say it to me. I just say it.
Anything. I just let the dominoes fall. Go ahead, Matt. You're on the clock.
Oh man. All right, because I'm trusting in my gut that TK is going to say what I hope he says. I'm really hoping. I can't. I have to represent for those who I'm representing. I have to say sensational Sherry.
TK.
Well, there can only be one. The reigning, defending best manager in WWE, Paul Heyman.
I love you, TK. I haven't told you that today.
Managing Bruno Sammartino, Bob Backlund. I didn't get to him before. But
okay, so we have, this is our final list now. We have Bobby Heenan, Paul Heyman, Sherry, and Jim Cornette. Are we satisfied?
I don't want it because I don't like Cornette, but Cornette was my 5, so I'll live with it.
Okay, so are we all satisfied? Jay, you satisfied? You good?
Absolutely.
TK.
Wait, but
I wish Pallbearer was on, but I can't complain. Yes, it's good.
Okay, Matt, you're good.
I can live with it. I mean, he was my number 5, 4.5.
Well, listen, the only other person
he's in the conversation,
right,
and I know that part. Despite the fact that I don't like him, and he almost made my list. So
right, if you're not satisfied, Mike could move him off to put Jimmy Hart. That's the only other.
I mean, that would be my preference, but if Cornette's his pick, I'm okay with that because Cornette was great.
I don't want to move him simply because he has. I know why you guys don't like him because you know he's a
piece of trash. We know that, but you know what? I'll give you this. Cornette should be in the conversation, if only the fact that he got over a loaded tennis racket. Who else could have gotten that over?
Carl, what's the rating?
You know,
what is the rating? What's our rating? Are we PG or are we T14? Am I allowed to say a curse word right now?
You can say whatever you want, man. You're good, bro. You're good.
Listen, I know he talks a lot of shit.
Listen, you're not ready for curse words, Mike.
I know he talks a lot of shit. But at the end of the day, he still was a good manager. He was there for Shawn Michaels matches. He was there for Vader's matches.
No one's disputing that.
Listen, I don't know if I put him all time, but if this is the list, then as a moderator, I have to be fair. This is what everybody goes with. So again, we're going Bobby Heenan, Paul Heyman, Sensational Sherry, and Jim Cornette. Guys, thank you for joining me here on this special edition Pro Wrestling Mount Rushmore for managers. Last but not least, we have the GOAT. Jay is on that one. That one's going to get a little bit spicy next Wednesday at 6 o'clock. Jay,
who's on the panel for that?
Who's on the? We got Jay's on there. Hopefully, we got Rick, Ray Jarvis, and Ron. If Ron could make it, if Ron, I know Ron is pretty busy. But Matt, you want to give a shout out to your podcast?
Yes, appreciate it. Follow Geek Nation online. We have 2 podcasts: the original Geek podcast covering everything sports and geek, and Breaking Ring Rust, which is our pro wrestling dedicated podcast.
All right. And Jay, you want to give a shout out? I know you're busy making movies. You want to tell people where they can find some of your feature films? I know you've been doing a great job with that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, easily you can find my links just simply by following me on the gram or Twitter as at El Barrio Zone. That's at EL_BARRIOS_OWN. And you can find all the links to any film that I've.
Well, you're going to have to slow down right there. OWN.
I'll definitely flash it across the screen for everybody.
Felt like Jeff Jarrett right there.
JEFF.
Thanks for watching the Sports Hit List. Be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe. In fact, do it now.